Now, I didn't know much about health and nutrition back then, but I knew if this was coming out like this, something was wrong. Now, I had a big problem. I had to think of a cure. I thought of a temporary cure. I moved the TV where I could see from the toilet. And that helped for a little while, but I lost so much blood, I was so dizzy, I couldn't figure out what was going on TV. So I got to the emergency room, and both doctors were there that night. And they ran a whole bunch of tests. I said, I definitely need to know what's going on because reruns are coming on. So they ran a whole bunch of tests, and they said, we definitely know what's wrong with you. You have food poisoning. 3 times in 1 week they told me I had food poisoning. I thought one of 2 things. I thought either the doctors were incorrect or somebody was trying to kill me. And I couldn't come up with too many people that didn't want me around back then. So I figured the doctors were incorrect with what they were telling me. So at the time I had drug insurance, which a lot of people call health insurance, but I call it drug insurance, which doesn't pay for health, it pays for drugs. So I went to this doctor near my house, and she ran a whole bunch of tests, and she says you have something called inflammatory bowel disease. I was so happy when she told me that. She said, what are you so happy about? I said, I don't have food poisoning. She said, do you know what inflammatory bowel disease is? I said, no, let's just get rid of it. She said, there's no known medical cure. And I said, well, what is it? She says, it's also known as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, which is an inflammation of the colon. And my colon was lined with many ulcers. It's very painful. And the worst part is, the average person in today's world, when they have to go to the bathroom, they get a signal of 2 to 3 hours to say, you better find the bathroom in the next 2 to 3 hours. But when you have inflammatory bowel disease, that signal, if you're lucky, is about 2 to 3 minutes, but it's usually 2 to 3 seconds. You really have no control over it. And you can imagine somebody going from subway to school to work and everything else, living with this. It wasn't healthy, a good thing to do. What happened was, I almost lost my job. I almost got lost. I had to quit school. At work, apparently you can go for a cigarette break every 5 minutes, but if you go to the bathroom every 5 minutes, that's not all right. And with school, I kept having to go to the bathroom. They thought I was cheating. So I couldn't live like this. So I said to my doctor, well, what can I do? All I remember her telling me at 20 years old was I was a high risk for colon cancer. But she told me, don't worry, there's a cure for colon cancer. I said, wait a second, there's no cure for inflammatory bowel disease, but there's a cure for colon cancer? She said, yeah, if we cut out your colon, you can't get colon cancer. I said, are you serious? And she said, yeah. I said, well, I'm not cutting out my colon, so what's my other choice? She said, I had to be on medication for the rest of my life. I said, is there any side effects to this medication? She said, possibly some minor side effects. Well, I went to the pharmacist to take the medication out, and they gave me a piece of paper with the medication, and it said in big red letters, major side effects to this medication. And I said to the pharmacist, I think you made a mistake. And he said, why? I said, because my doctor told me there were only minor side effects. And this paper said there are major side effects. He looked at the paper, he looked at the medicine, he said, that's correct. So I didn't know who to believe. So I took the medication, and I found out real quickly that my doctor was incorrect and the pharmacist was correct. I started developing all these crazy side effects. I didn't know what to do. So I went back to the doctor and I told her what happened. So she wrote me another prescription for all the side effects. And when she wrote me the prescription for the side effects, she said, I asked her if there were any side effects to that medicine. And she said, possibly some minor side effects. And I went to take that medicine out, and they gave me a paper that said major side effects. And this kept happening. I was sicker after I went to my doctor than before. And I didn't know what to do. Then somebody told me that diet had a lot to do with my condition. I said, that's impossible. They said, why? I said, because nobody can eat better than I eat because I'm fit. Let me give you an idea. I've been doing this a long time. I met many sick people. I never met anyone who eats worse than I used to eat, but I didn't know it then. On the average day, I used to eat over 8,000 calories and over 300 grams of animal protein and no fruits or vegetables because I hated the taste of produce. And I didn't know that at the time. My breakfast, lunch, and dinner was basically pizza and Jolt. And I didn't know better. I thought I was eating great. Well, he said there's a connection between diet and your condition. So since I didn't know any better, I figured I'd ask my doctor. So I asked my doctor, I said, is there any connection between my diet and inflammatory bowel disease? And she said there are no medical studies to prove there's any connections between your diet and your condition. Which I find kind of strange because she didn't know what my diet was. Right. I looked more into this, and since she wasn't getting me any better, I figured I'd look more into this. And somebody told me if I eliminated dairy products from my diet, my condition would continue to get better. So I asked my doctor, I said, is there any connection between dairy products and inflammatory bowel disease? And she said there's no medical studies to prove there's any connection between dairy products and inflammatory bowel disease. Here's where I got wise. Without telling my doctor, I decided I was going to eliminate dairy products to see what would happen. Now, I didn't even know what dairy products was at the time. I knew it was milk because it said right in the container in big letters, dairy milk. But I didn't know it was ice cream and butter and cheese and all these things. And when I found that it was, I realized I had 80% of my diet had dairy products in it. So I eliminated it to see what would happen. And it was amazing. I started to feel better. So that's when I started to put some connections together. The first connection was there is a connection between diet and my condition. And the other connection was my doctor really doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, then somebody told me that if I stopped eating animals, my condition would begin to heal. So I asked my doctor, I said, is there any connection between consuming animals and my condition? Take a wild guess what she told me.
Of course not.
There are no medical studies to prove there's any connection between animal protein and your condition. So when she told me that, I became like a vegetarian overnight. And right away I was feeling better. I was like, this doctor's amazing. Everything she told me to do, I did the opposite, and I felt better. If you want to be the healthiest person, you go to the most popular doctor. And whatever they say, do the opposite. You'll be pretty healthy. By the way, are any doctors here? Now, if there are, some doctors are truly amazing. Emergency room doctors, case of spinal cord injury, plastic surgery after an accident, and some other cases. These doctors are a true blessing and really needed. However, if we're going to put something in our body that's going to create an illness, the answer isn't dealing with some drug to deal with the pain. The answer is to eliminate the problem. Health doesn't begin with what you add to your diet, it's what you eliminate. Eliminate the thing that's causing the problem, and the problem will begin to go away. So knowing this, I started to look more into this, and I was a vegetarian at the time, a junk food vegetarian. I didn't know any better. I still hated produce. I was improving a little, but not completely. And then somebody told me stress had a lot to do with my condition. So I asked my doctor, is there any connection between stress and my condition? And my doctor told me there's no medical study to prove any connection between stress and my condition. When she told me that, I knew I had to reduce the stress in my life. So I eliminated my doctor. Right away, I felt better. Now let me clarify something up because I am from Brooklyn. I didn't like eliminate my doctor. I just stopped going to visit her. And I had to move to a more stressless environment. I left my job on Wall Street. I wanted to move to a more stressless environment. So I looked all over the country. This was about 17 years ago. And I chose West Palm Beach, Florida. Now when I moved down there 17 years ago, there wasn't too much stress going on. People know how to vote down there back then. A very stressless environment. So I get down there, and I'll never forget, I see this van passing my house every day. And the reason why I recognize the van is it had this word on the side of the van that I couldn't pronounce. So I said to myself one day after a couple of weeks of this happening, if I see that van one more time, I'm going to follow it to see where it's going. So came down my street the next day, I followed it, got in my car to see where it was going. It stopped at the parking lot of a health food store. That day was the first day of my life I'd ever been to a real health food store. Now I've been to many health food stores prior to that, but they weren't real health food stores, they were fake health food stores. Now I'm not the person to focus on the negatives, so I'm not going to give you the name of these fake health food stores. I'll just give you initials. GNC. So, the van stops. Oh, have you heard of that? The van stops, and I stop my car to see what's happening. Do you have a microphone? Maybe they can't hear me in the back.
You want it? Yeah.
If they can't hear me in the back. So the van stops, and then I stop my car to see what happens, and I see the back door swing open very slowly. And I see about 6 of the most sickly looking people I've ever seen practically fall out of the back of the van. Then the front door swings open very quickly, and I see one of the healthiest people I've ever seen come out of the front of the van, and he starts walking towards the health food store. And they start following him. So I was curious to know what was going on, so I just tagged along the back of the line, hoping this fella couldn't count. And